Hi, it's Shireen Jones from Healthy Now, and suddenly it's summer. Yay! And we are in the midst of our Healthy Now reboot, and part of our reboot, we have 3 meals, a smoothie, an energy bowl, and then a super salad for meal 3 or dinner. So tonight I thought I want to make a soup. And it's summer and it's warm, and you don't often think of having soups in the summer, although there are plenty of cold soups like a gazpacho or a vichyssoise or a cold cucumber soup that are very popular in the summer. But we're not talking about that right now. Yesterday in my CSA box, I got a beautiful head of lettuce, but I had already several heads of lettuce, so I'm thinking, I would like a soup with lettuce. And I know you're thinking lettuce and a soup. So yes, it does happen, really and truly. And so one thing I like to do, obviously like a lot of us do, is we'll go online and try to look up, different recipes. Sometimes when I don't know what I'm going to cook, but I have something in my refrigerator, I'll go and put that ingredient in, and voila, here come all these recipes. But today I decided to use my own cookbooks and my own resources. So here I have a Marcella Hazan book. I have a cookbook here, Anna Jones, A Modern Way to Cook. This is a fabulous vegetarian cookbook. And then I have my old standby favorite, Moosewood Daily Special, which this cookbook is basically soups and salads. So it's perfect for the reboot. Moosewood recipes tend to have a lot of ingredients, so I think some people might find that daunting, but I find that nearly every recipe I ever make from any of their cookbooks, and they're all vegetarian, are delicious. So I found a vegetable pistou in this cookbook, which is sort of like a minestrone. But I was like, I don't exactly want like that pesto, although I think I'm going to do basil. And then Anna Jones has a white beans, greens, and olive oil ribollita. And in our reboot, we do not eat any gluten, so we're not eating bread, so we wouldn't have the ribollita. I'm not sure I know how to pronounce it correctly. But I liked her idea. One thing that she had in it that I really wanted was 6 stalks of celery. So I'm like, yep, I'm there. Okay, that sounds good, because I decided that whatever I made tonight, I wanted it to be green. I want the whole thing to be green. So I'm going to use celery, I'm going to use leeks, I'm going to use lettuce, and I may use zucchini. And then in Marcella, who I love, her cookbooks are fabulous. And they are the opposite of Moosewood in that the recipes usually have very few ingredients, but they are always delicious. And she had a Ligurian, fava bean, and lettuce soup. And in fact, she has many recipes for savory cooked lettuce in this cookbook. So I guess it's a popular thing in Italy. Anyways, hers is very simple: fava beans, lettuce sliced thinly, olive oil, some onion, and some broth. That's it, period. So I think combining sort of ideas from all of these, I'm going to create a green summer soup where lettuce is the star, but I think I will also top it with some bitter, peppery arugula that I got in the CSA yesterday, and then I will finish it with a gremolata that I will chop up some nuts with some fresh basil and maybe some lemon zest and garlic. And so that's what okay. Here I am with the star of the show, the romaine lettuce that we're going to slice thinly, and I'm going to put it in my salad spinner. So I'm slicing it about about a ½ an inch wide or thick. And when I worked in a kitchen at one point, I worked with an Egyptian woman, and we often had to cut up the lettuce for Caesar salad. that was very popular at this particular place that I worked. And she told me that the core, the inside part of the romaine lettuce, don't ever, I cut down as far as nearly to the end here. She said it was very, very good for your skin. So I'm all about that. That sounds good to me. So, do the whole romaine lettuce. We're going to put it in the salad spinner and we will rinse that off. Next up, we have our celery. So I have 6 stalks here. Unfortunately, the celery, the place where I bought it this past time, did not have the stalk. These are the celery hearts. So they're missing the top part with the leaves, and I love celery leaves. Don't ever throw those out. They are so delicious and fragrant in a salad. I take those and will add them to my salads, and they're just fabulous. So I will, I'm gonna trim the ends here that are a little brown, and obviously the bottom part. And then I'm gonna cut these also. They're more like about a 1/4 inch. They're a little bit smaller. And as I'm cutting here, I'm thinking these stalks are a little wide, so I sort of meant to, but I forgot when I was cutting. I sort of meant to cut those lengthwise so that the bites will be a little bit smaller. So that's what we're going to do with those. And then I have my leeks, or I have a leek right now, which I'm going to show you. So with the leek, what we do, and these, this is a trimmed leek. Obviously, a lot of times you get the greens and you can cut those off. You can eat those, but a lot of times this is the part that people really go for, sort of the white part and a little bit into the green. The best thing to do with your leek is to cut it in half lengthwise, and then to cut it into half moon rounds, because you are going to want to run this under some water in your colander, because a lot of times that's where the sand collects or the dirt. So you definitely don't want to ever, there's nothing worse than having a bite into your soup or whatever dish you're making and you have that grit. Horrible. So we want to be sure and rinse the leeks. Now we have our zucchini squash, which I'm actually not going to cut on the cutting board because I just cut my leeks here. And after I cut the leeks, I want to be sure and rinse the cutting board so that there's no sand on it. But with zucchini, particularly ones from your CSA or farmer's market, you want to be sure and really use a brush under running water and get all the sand and the grit off of these, because they grow, on the ground and they can be very gritty, so then you could have the same problem. So I will cut my zucchini in half, and then I will cut each half lengthwise, and so then I'll have, 4, a pie with 4 little triangles. Next up, I'm going to put some parsley in this. And so what we'll do is we'll saute the leeks in some olive oil. Then I will put in the celery, and then I will put in the lettuce and the zucchini with some parsley, and we're gonna let that simmer with some chicken broth, or vegetable broth, or water, whatever you want. Season your vegetables as they're sauteing with a little bit of salt. Not too much, because remember, your broth has salt in it, although if you're using water, obviously you'll need a little bit more salt. And then towards the end, we will add in some drained white beans. But we will come back and talk about that as the soup is simmering, as I get everything together, and then I'm going to also show you how I do my gremolata. So my soup is bubbling away on the back, or I should say my vegetables are bubbling away on the back, on the burner, I should say, behind me. They look beautiful, bright green, just what I wanted. I did a couple changes for me. I decided not to use the 6 stalks of celery. That just seemed like a lot once I chopped them up. And I probably did about 4, and it came to right around a cup. And the other thing I did is I wanted my zucchini a little bit smaller than the size I described to you, so I cut them in, when I cut the zucchini in half, the half, I cut then again 3 times lengthwise, so that I would get 6 pieces of zucchini. So I'm hoping that's making sense, but I'm sure you can figure that out. Also, I read over my recipes, my little mix of recipes, and both Marcella and moosewood called for marjoram, which is not an herb most people keep in their kitchen. In fact, I don't know why I bought this. It was sealed up. I had never used it, but that was the one herb, that was the one flavor that Marcella had in her soup besides the fava beans and the the onion and the lettuce. And in the moosewood, which I mentioned usually has a lot of ingredients, it also included marjoram and bay leaves. So bay leaves oftentimes people do have in their kitchens. If you have one, throw it in. I wouldn't say go out and buy the marjoram. It has sort of a lemony herbaceous, I don't know how to describe it. It's different. I'm going to put it in. I'm going to try it. Marcella says to put it in towards the end, so that's what I'm going to do. I've already got the bay leaf in, so it's simmering to give the flavor. Now what we're going to do is make our gremolata. And I have my vegetable peeler, so I'm going to peel a few little pieces of lemon peel. Be sure and don't get the white pith because that can be bitter. So I'm just peeling it very thin, and you can see there's almost no white. So I'm gonna mix all this up. So I have a handful of basil. I have these little strips of lemon. I have one little garlic. And when I've done this in the past, like we had a Zoom cooking class one time, and someone said, I don't really like the raw garlic, which is fine. And in fact, I did not, you may have noticed, I did not put any garlic in the soup because I'm going to use the raw garlic on top. Certainly you could throw in some cloves of garlic in that. Why not? I mean, we're making this up as we go. So if that's your thing, go for it. So typically you would use pine nuts. You could use any nut that you have. You know, if you have walnuts, if you have pecans, it really doesn't matter. Cashews, anything is going to taste delicious. I toasted my raw pine nuts and I actually did not burn them, which is a miracle. And I had recently bought Brazil nuts because they're very high in selenium, and selenium is something that we need that we don't often get a lot of. And so I had roasted some of these. You don't need a lot of these. In fact, I think I'm just going to use 3. So now, this knife I don't feel like is big enough. I want a big knife that's going to really come in here and chop this up. And so I'm going to, excuse me, get my bigger chef's knife. And I'm just going to chop, 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 you know, kind of chop everything together here. And it's, you know, it's a little, it's messy. That's okay. It's going to be rough. That's okay. I mean, if you want to throw it in the blender with some olive oil, then you have pesto. But during our reboot, we're not having dairy, as I may have mentioned before. Dairy, gluten, sugar, alcohol, red meat. So anyways, this is just a fun, I don't know, I just like the roughness. I like it. And so what I'll do is I'm not going to keep on doing this and bore you to death with my chopping it up. But, you know, I'll just keep on chopping and chopping and chopping. And then I'll probably throw in some olive oil, just sprinkle some over. Excuse me, I'll do that right now. Excuse me, wasn't prepared for that. But while we're talking, so I'll just put some over that. And then, oh, sorry, once again, not prepared. My salt here. We'll sprinkle some salt on it, not very much. And now we have a little olive oil that's going to hold things together a little bit more. So look at that. I mean, if you have a mortar and pestle, then, you know, that's fine. You could do that. But I think this works really, really well. And I'm trying to get everything chopped up here. As I said, I have fun, so I think I better stop because you're going to get totally bored watching me. I'll show you what it looks like at the end. So as promised, here is the gremolata on the cutting tray. Obviously, I'll probably serve it in a bowl, but it's roughly chopped. You could chop it as much as you wanted. And I mentioned before, you could also put all this in your food processor or a blender, and you'd add a little bit more oil. Typically, pesto has cheese in it, but you don't have to put cheese in pesto. And in fact, during our reboot, we have a pesto that we love from Trader Joe's, which is the kale pesto, which does not have cheese in it. It's a vegan pesto. So it's a perfect pesto, and I use it all the time. It's delicious. Now, the other thing I wanted to, since I have your attention, I wanted to show you another one of my dear precious cookbooks. This is called The Spice Cookbook. It was published the year after I was born in 1964. And my mother had this cookbook, and I grew up cooking from it. And she gave it to me at some point. She found it in a used bookstore, and I used some errant leaves of parsley here. Anyways, it is the Spice Cookbook, and so they talk about different spices. And marjoram is the herb of honor and happiness, and it is in the oregano family. Actually, it's in the mint family, which is a cousin of oregano. And in the book in 1964, it says increasingly popular oregano. Marjoram is sweeter, more delicate, and oregano is lustier and pleasantly bitter and assertive. So that's sort of the flavor profile for our marjoram. So anyways, I did go ahead and put some in. It's dried. I had the dried, obviously, I think I showed you. So we'll see how it tastes. The soup is still simmering, but nearly done. And so I would say that's 10, maybe 15 minutes on the stove, depending on how long you want your zucchini to cook. That's going to take the longest, obviously, of all the vegetables that we put in there. I also opened my can of white beans, drained them, rinsed them, and put those in so that they can sort of simmer and the flavors can meld. I wanted to, because this is during our reboot, I wanted to mention why, well, I said in the beginning I wanted a green soup. I love green, and I love eating green food for many, many reasons. It tastes good, it looks good, it's also very good for me, good for you too. But I wanted to also talk about typically, like a pistou or a minestrone might have tomatoes, and many summer-based soups have tomatoes. And some people have trouble with tomatoes. They're part of the nightshade family, as I'm sure you know, along with peppers and eggplant and several other things. And I happen to be one of those people that I just can't eat a lot of tomatoes. I definitely cannot eat them raw, which is really sad every once in a while when there's a beautiful one from a garden, or from the farmer's market. I'll try a bite or two, and it's delicious. It's so fabulous, but I really, I can eat them cooked, but I just can't eat a lot of them. So that's just another reason for my, wanting to do a green soup. And when we're at the reboot, part of the thing is to think about what you're eating. And if you're taking foods out, you're seeing how your body feels without them, number one. And then when you put foods back in, you want to see how your body feels with them. So maybe sometimes a deeper dive, I mentioned some of the things that we've taken out of our diets for the reboot. I did not mention processed foods, but that's a big one. Processed foods and gluten and sugar and alcohol and dairy and red meat. But a deeper dive sometimes might be something like nightshades. If you ever have eggplant and you sort of notice that strange feeling in your mouth, you might have a reaction to nightshades. Maybe not all of them. So enough on that. The last thing I wanted to tell you and show you is I have this very mangy looking arugula. You can definitely tell this is organic because every leaf has a million little holes in it. So there were definitely some insects that really enjoyed this arugula. It is extremely peppery. It's delicious. Arugula is not something that does well cooked. So I will just, when I turn the soup off, when I'm done, I will just chop up some of these leaves and put them in the top of the soup. In fact, actually, as I'm thinking about it, I think I will just leave them to the side and we can put them on with the gremolata to add a little pepper to peppery greenness to the soup. So that's it. I will have a picture of the finished soup that I will include in the video. Hopefully it tastes good, it smells really good, and I will let you know if there's any changes. But this is my green summer soup, I guess. I'll have to think of a better name. And I should say once again, this is Healthy Now. I'm Shereen Jones, and I am making this soup during our reboot.